like money is not the end of all, right? Like money is just a tool that we use to exchange goods and services, but there's gotta be purpose in your life, right? And that purpose is what fulfills you, not the money itself.
Right.
And also for entrepreneurs, I think, like I was diagnosed with ADHD a month and a half ago, and my psychoanalyst told me two things in your life that will never change. You can never retire, and you can never get a job. Welcome to the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mancela. Today we have with us an amazing entrepreneur. We're becoming very good friends. We met this year with Mr. Marc, and it's my pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome, brother.
David, thank you for having me.
So, Marc, for the audience, can you tell me your full name, where do you live, and what do you do to make this world a better place?
It's a great starting point. David, my name is Marc Robinson, and I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have spent the entire 25 years that I've been in the business world in the Southeast United States, split between Atlanta, Georgia, and Charlotte, North Carolina. And how I have made this world a better place is such an intriguing question. But I would say that the answer is I've got a passion for growth, and that passion is primarily activated with helping other people grow and helping other people see paths to bigger places than they might see for themselves. And my entrepreneurial career has essentially been one in which I have been able to build organizations where the organizational growth is really driven by it being an opportunity for the constituents to grow in their own storylines. And so people growth and helping people either get unstuck or helping people accomplish things that they didn't necessarily know that they had the capability to do has really been the driving force of my career and continues to be the driving force that motivates me.
It's a beautiful example of knowing what works and what doesn't work, right? People think that because they're in certain business, it's about the product or service, and never to realize that it's all about the people. Regardless
David, I don't think we've ever talked about this, but the industry that I have been in for most of my career is commercial real estate service business, and some partners and I were able to grow a investment capital market service business into a big business and sold it to a global commercial real estate services firm. And in hindsight, after we sort of finished the transition and finished the earnout, and I reflected on that chapter, while it was a service business in the commercial real estate sector, it was really a coaching business at its core that happened to do real estate services. It could have been any service that we were providing. The DNA of the organization was a people growth organization that just happened to do that particular line of work.
I actually fell into that trap, and I almost went bankrupt for it. I treated my business like a company that will deliver software services to my clients to automate their business process and help them grow. But I never thought about the people. It was only about the result and how good the software was and how happy my client was, and I completely forgot about my people. I had no idea what culture was, and I honestly, I didn't really care. The funny part is that regardless whether you have a notion of having a culture or not, you still have a culture. It could be a horrible culture, but you still have one. And
it's really interesting.
Right? Almost went bankrupt until I learned my lesson, and it was heartbreaking. And it's, again, I guess I was brought up as a software developer, as an engineer, and then as an architect, and then I became a leader in organizations, but I was never really an entrepreneur. So I didn't really know what I was doing until it shocked me in the face, right? So this is a clear example. You actually knew what you were doing, and look at your success now, right?
I didn't really know. The only thing that was different about my story, I think, from the beginning was that we didn't have the software, or we didn't have a product. So the success of our business was related to only the service that we were providing, and that service was being provided by people. So we didn't have the ability to get distracted by the concept of something that we were selling, or something that we were producing was the main thing. The main thing was what our people were doing, and so I was kind of lucky in that regard. But how did you discover that it needed to be the other way around in your story?
It was tough. I started by myself, and quickly I grew to 3-4 people. And within this first year, by 2008, I was about 10 people. And then I joined ventures with another company. He became my partner, and so we joined. He was a very good salesperson. I was a very good technical delivery person that knew how to make money. He didn't know how to make money, but he knew how to sell. And I didn't know how to sell, but I knew how to make money with software. And talk about exponential growth. In 2 years, we went from, the combined business was about 13, 14 people. And we actually went from that to 110 people in 2 years.
Wow.
And so we reached 8 figures in those 2 years. And the growth gave me a sense of greed that you will not believe. And I was so focused on the money. When I was getting checks for $500,000 from clients, I'm like, what is this? That will happen every week and a half, every 2 weeks. And when I saw, and then I will see my payroll, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? So because of the demand that we had, I started letting people into the business that were exceptional in software development, but I had no idea where they were in their values, because I lost my values too. So
wow,
that actually gave me a heart attack. 2 years later, I had a heart attack. I was working.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So what year was that?
2011.
How old were you at the time?
I was 40.
So you were really running hot.
Yeah, I started working, 15, 16 hours a day, traveling overseas every 2 weeks to get more developers, get more people, focus 100% on the money until, there's something called heart and brain coherence. And, if you're a believer, there is a verse in the Bible. It's Mark 5 verse, actually it's Matthew 5 verse 8. It says, when you actually get blessed with your mind and your heart, and you actually get fixed inside of you, this is the only way that you can actually see God outside. Until your heart, your brain are not in coherence, it's impossible to see God outside. All you see is misery and chaos and horrible things. And I lost that connection. And basically my heart gave up. Basically, it said to my mind, I don't want to work for you anymore. If you don't fix this, I'm on strike.
That's actually a really cool way of explaining it. And I actually do believe that you're probably right.
Yeah. And so I lost everything. I went from 110 people down to 5 guys. I lost 95% of the revenue. I took the first holiday in many years because I almost lose my wife and my kids. I was a workaholic. So we went to Thailand for a month, but the tickets were one-way tickets. We didn't know when we were going to come back. And I didn't care if I had a business when I came back or not. I needed to heal myself. And,
wow. And how was the recovery process, all things considered, both with the health as well as the overall decompress from this insane way of life?
So the first lesson was more doesn't mean better. That was the first lesson. Second lesson is, what is it to have money if you don't have health? Right? So I got that very quickly, right? What I didn't get too much though was the leadership part. So because back then I was blaming everything on my business partner. the whole thing collapsed, right? I was left with my loyal clients that were with me before we did the joint venture. We separated the businesses again, and it took me 2 more years. Because the thing is, after I came back from that holiday and I started to heal myself, I learned how to scuba dive to control my breathing.
Is that actually the motive that you had in learning to scuba dive, was all about the breathing?
Yeah, actually, when I went to see my doctor, he said, "You are a young man. You shouldn't be having these heart problems." So he said, I give you 2 options. You keep the same lifestyle and you're going to come back, or you're probably going to die, or you're going to have an aneurysm or something like that. Or you change your lifestyle and look for something that teaches you how to breathe. Because the problem with you is that you're having these panic attacks and you don't even know how to get out of them. And breathing is everything. And she gave me these pills, and they were opioids. And she said, I'll give you these pills, and they will actually allow you to keep your lifestyle, but you're going to become an addict in 3 months. So I took the pills for a week or two until I could actually come down, because I was wrecked. Everything will trigger me, and I will get panic attacks. And then she told me, find a sports that teaches you how to breathe. And since I was in Thailand and we were in the south part in Koh Phi Phi, a beautiful island, it was low season. It was May, low season for there. And so I found a dive instructor, and I learned how to dive with this guy. I was doing 4 or 5 dives a day. So the whole time I was diving.
So
Right?
the version of you that I've gotten to know that is very thoughtful, has a lot of peaceful energy and empathy, that's not the guy that existed in his 30s.
I became a monster, brother. I will make people cry, right? I will be so mad and so rough and so, my way shall be done or not, that I will actually, people will be afraid of me to talk to me. My developers wouldn't want to talk to me.
So interesting to hear the story, because the version of you today, none of that would be even something that I ever would have suspected.
Right. Yeah, it's life lessons, right?
Wow.
But going back to you, how did you get into business? Did you go to university, or did you right out of high school you start your business? Did you ever get a job in your life?
I went to college in the United States and graduated with a program in real estate. I didn't go there for that reason. I was actually a competitive cyclist in high school and thought that I might want to go and try to ride in the Tour de France one day. So I was very focused on body and biometrics and things like that. But I switched over to a real estate program in college, which sort of started me down a road in the real estate industry, primarily in the apartment industry. And I worked out of college for an organization for 2 years that was in the apartment industry. It was a vendor that served the apartment industry in the advertising space of the apartment industry. And about 2 years in, I decided that it was time to migrate over into what I've been doing my whole career, which is the capital markets industry. It's essentially the money business that drives the investment of apartments in real estate. And I worked. So at that point, I took a leap, and the industry is set up. At that time, it was set up such that if you went into that business, there were really 2 ways that you could go in. One was to just be an analyst, where you were working for an established person and crunching numbers for them, and the other was to try to go right into the business and compete with those people that have already been in the market for a while. And I decided to go right in, and there was no pay in that era, so you sort of took the risk, and typically took about a year to get your first deal done. And so you had to have a 12-month runway of savings in order to make it work. And I knew that. So I had prepared myself for that in the couple of years prior, and told my parents at the time. I was 24, I think, and said, look, at the time I was doing pretty well with the original company I was with out of college. And they thought I was crazy for leaving what appeared to be a path that was looking pretty favorable. But I left and was very fortunate. In the first year that I was in that industry, I found a couple of deals that was a little bit unusual to have happen in as quick a timeline as it did. And I wound up closing 2 of them in the first year. So I was able to, to get through that first year in terms of the financial gap, and then closed a couple of deals at the end of the first year, and wound up winning the Rookie of the Year award for this national U.S. company, and closed some deals, made some money, which enabled me to begin investing in a team to support me. So I started hiring analysts and marketing people and other things to build a team. And about 2 years later, I actually left that company and started another company. So that would have been 2002, and essentially built a business that was based on a very specific theme within the industry that I noticed was what I thought at the time a place where there was a potential for a niche. And so started that in 2002, and a handful of guys joined me in that company early on, in the first couple of years, and those guys became partners. And then we grew that business, opened offices throughout the Sunbelt, and sold it in 2016 to a big global commercial real estate services firm. And we all stayed on. We had a 5-year commitment to stay on, during which time we actually tripled the size of the business from the point at which they bought it. And
Wow.
I had a national role with that firm. And the interesting part is there were 7 people that were key constituents, sort of senior leaders at the firm that we sold, and all but one have moved on once the 5-year commitment had been satisfied. And it's an interesting case study, because all of them had been extraordinarily financially successful at the company that had acquired us, but they were all entrepreneurs at heart. And the global company was not an entrepreneurial environment, and despite it being financially rewarding, it was not emotionally satisfying.
Yeah.
And so that band of brothers is sort of broken and has landed in all different places. But we had a very, very entrepreneurial group. We had a lot of fun growing the business between 2002 and 2016, and then a nice capital event for everybody, and then a number of people have gone into new ventures, including myself. So I've started another firm along with a couple of my former partners, and we've sort of spent the last 12 months plus or minus in that sort of first inning, launch the business phase, and we're making some very good progress. We including the partners, we've got 22 people that are on the team now, and are really thrilled with where we are and the growth of that business. And what we're doing there is not brokering real estate. We were primarily brokering the sale of apartment communities in our prior function. And in today's company, we're buying apartments, and we're buying industrial assets in the United States, primarily in the Sunbelt. And so things are off to a pretty good start. It's been a pretty busy year. And right now, as we sit here in December, with interest rates having moved as much as they have in the last 90 days, and some of the other domestic and global variables, it's a pretty choppy time in the real estate investment business. So it's been pretty interesting. We're very hopeful that this is a time in which that uncertainty and choppiness will translate into some improved opportunity even for us. So hoping that this uncertainty is actually a benefit as we're looking to find assets to buy.
It's fascinating the way you talk, and I want to make a few points out of the conversation, because for a normal person, they will not understand if you had a huge exit. Number one, why would you stay for 5 years, and why would you want to have another business after that? And I think it goes back to what we were talking about, where like money is not the end of all, right? Like money is just a tool that we use to exchange goods and services, but there's gotta be purpose in your life, right? And that purpose is what fulfills you, not the money itself.
Right.
And also for entrepreneurs, I think, like I was diagnosed with ADHD a month and a half ago, and my psychoanalyst told me two things in your life that will never change. You can never retire, and you can never get a job.
That's
Because you're an
really,
entrepreneur.
it's so true. It's so true. And honestly, David, the business that we had was a service business. And so when they bought us, really what they bought was a book of business that was being overseen by a number of people that had relationships. And so in that industry, there typically is an earnout period where, they didn't really buy the revenue stream only because the revenue stream was primarily attached to a service that was being provided by people. And so generally speaking, if you sell a business like that, there is a mandatory sort of stay on earnout period. And so that was something that was part of the deal. And we understood that. But what's interesting is that going back to the money and the motivation, the financial years that we had post selling out were really, really good, really good. We had grown the business even more, and the risk was very, very low. The reward was very, very high. So in business, most of the time, that's really what you're looking to accomplish is low risk, high reward, and a reasonably high level of predictability. And all three of those boxes were being checked. There were other boxes, however, that really were not being checked. And I'm a member of the Strategic Coach organization, and a lot of the way that I see the world has been formed by some of the thinking that I've learned there. And one of the things that was a problem with that is that while I did have low risk, high reward, and a lot of predictability, I didn't have a lot of freedoms. And the freedoms conversation is one that's a very interesting one. Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach guy, outlines freedoms in multiple types: the freedom of time, the freedom of money, kind of financial freedom, the freedom of purpose, meaning free to do what you want to do, and freedom of relationship. And so in a service business like I was in, I really didn't have freedom of time because I was always working on deals, and the deals drove the timeline of everything. And then I didn't really have freedom of relationship because our general modus operandi was to make the market and to have every client. I did have financial freedom, but I didn't really have the ability to use that because I was strapped to the deal and to the desk all the time. And I didn't have freedom of purpose either. At the end of it, I really wasn't entirely activated by what I was doing. I was just doing it because of the money. And that's kind of where it just got to the point where it was pretty hollow. And now it's back to waking up in the morning and doing things for reasons that are more true to my motives. And Dan Sullivan, again, has laid out some pretty interesting thinking there. But his question to people that are entrepreneurs that have flexibility to do what they want, either they've earned that right by way of success. The question that he asks people to ask is, what is it that you could do that would keep you fascinated and motivated for the rest of your life? Mm-hmm. And to your point, I definitely do not ever want to retire, ever. I intend to be highly engaged in something, and it needs to be something that makes me fascinated and motivated. And I happen to be somebody that definitely includes a strong financial byproduct as part of the equation, but it's not the only equation. But I definitely like to make money, and I like to give it away and do other. I mean, it's not really just a matter of spending it or having things, but there's a lot of satisfaction that comes in doing good with money. And so, to your point, and I too have, a classic ADHD. I've got my my focus pills right here in my briefcase, And I can't be idle. It's not good for me. Not at all.
Yeah, no,
I'm a much better version of myself when I am focused on the pursuit of a worthy goal or a worthy cause.
Yeah. You touch a beautiful point, the freedom part. At the end of the day, all we're looking for is freedom, right? One of the reasons why my business keeps thriving after 17 years. Before I tell the story, I had a client that came to my office 2 days ago. Nobody comes to my office because we are a remote company. We have people in 11 countries. But this lady was local, and it's a big organization here in town, and she wanted to come see the office. I got an office because I cannot work from home. I am a PhD, so I need the exchange, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
She came and she said, so I asked her, how do you find us? And she's like, oh, I Google you guys. I'm like, but I live in a town, they call it the Canadian Silicon Valley. I live in a town, we have 2,000 software companies here. So she's like, what? Like you had to Google somebody? And she said, yeah, my website people, I asked them because they wanted to build a mobile app for their organization. And she said, my website people knew all these companies and they are all out of business. They are all gone, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy because during COVID, I actually grew instead of shrinking, right? So it made me realize why, and it's the freedom part. One of the things that I established when I opened my own business is give my people as much freedom as possible while delivering maximum results to our clients. So I never control where they work from, at what time they work. As long as they are there for meetings, and as long as they deliver at the end of the week what they say they were going to deliver, everybody's happy. As long as the client is happy, everybody's happy. As a result, I got people in 11 countries, and I don't really care when they get up and when they go to bed. Right? We have technology that organizes the work, and we have weekly and daily meetings with them in their projects. But that's it. So the freedom that I'm looking for in my own business as an entrepreneur, I try to give to my people. And I think that creates a beautiful culture. People want to work for us, right?
You know, going back to the former company that I had, my partners and I have been talking about a few things recently, and one of the themes that we've talked about is what made that company unique. And it sounds to me like there's an element of it in your company currently is that company was set up so that the people that work there, they worked at that company, which I was a part of creating that infrastructure, but they ran their own business at the company. So it was really a situation where they felt that they were running their own business that happened to be sitting on our platform.
Right.
And they never felt like they worked for me or for us. They felt like they worked for themselves, and we were there to support them. And I think that there are two types of organizations, one in which people feel that they have that autonomy to do what it is that they're doing, and that there is a sense of purpose in that. And an organization sort of nurtures that as being something that's theirs, those outcomes, whatever they may be, versus the organizations where it is a dictator that is just tasking everybody with things, and they're just doing it to get the task done for the person that issued the orders. And there are case studies of both of those organizations being successful, or both types of organizations. But we've, or at least in my experience, I really don't know how to do it any other way than to really allow people to have that freedom to do something that they feel is purposeful, and have that be organized within something where if they carry out their plan and another person carries out their plan, everybody carries out their plan, we as an organization sort of win the war.
Yeah. And, I think it depends on the personality type and the people you attract, because you tend to attract people like you, right? Because I've been in corporate. I was in corporate for 10 years. And a lot of the folks that were working with me, they were very happy people. And they were task oriented, like you said, like they come in, they know what to do, how to please the boss, check in at 9, check out at 5, done, right?
Yep.
No worries. I was miserable with that situation. That's why I opened my own business.
Me
right?
too.
I couldn't handle it, right?
Me too. Yeah, we were talking recently, and for me, the stress of having a boss is exponentially higher than the stress of the realities of the marketplace. I can go home and sleep just fine, knowing that if something goes wrong, there's no safety net. But having to explain to somebody else why something wasn't done the way they liked it is unbearable for me. It's unbearable.
So you had that business for a long time. How did you survive the real estate crash in 2008?
It was hard. Yeah, that was a season that was the most challenging of any I've ever gone through, candidly, because I had taken some risk and made some bets in the years that led up to that, and I got banged up and bruised pretty meaningfully, and so all of my livelihood in all forms was tethered to real estate. So our primary business was brokering the sale of apartment communities. We had been investing in apartment communities also, so we were doing both. But my ordinary income was coming, via being a part of the real estate industry, and then I had placed a lot of investment dollars in that same industry. And so when the winds came and sort of blew the storm in, it was a very, very stressful time. And it's definitely a time that I will never forget. We're doing real estate investments today. A lot of the lessons learned in that period of time are pretty front and center as to what we're trying to avoid this time. But it was really, really hard. And I will say, and I was thinking about this when you were explaining your story, that I did get to a point where, and it may be similar to the way that you felt when you said you finally went to Thailand. But there was a time where it was too big for me to control. And there was a piece when I finally recognized that it was basically, I was now going to ride the wave. I couldn't control the wave. And I think there was a moment in time where I went from being perhaps as stressed out as I had ever been, trying to control something that I could not control, to finally recognizing that was the case and just sort of releasing it and saying, I'm going to ride down the hill and we'll see what happens. And I know that I can't stop it. And there was probably the greatest amount of peace that I've ever had when I finally just released control.
Yeah.
And and I'll never forget how I felt. It's funny because at the moment in time that happened, I wasn't clear on what the future looked like financially. There was a lot of very consequential negative outcomes that were very realistic. And there was so much peace that I found in that moment. And I'm very, very clear that in the subsequent years, as things got going again, and then, notable prosperity occurred, I will say that I think I was much more at peace in that time of the greatest amount of uncertainty, compared even to the times of the greatest prosperity. Because when there's a lot of prosperity, there's always the risk of it going away. There's always, you never want to go backwards ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you finally release control, there's just this certain peace that was remarkably powerful.
And I am the true believer that the biggest breakthroughs come after the worst failures. The harder the season, the better you become after you go through that tunnel, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I bet you were a different man after that.
Session, so different.
Look at me now, right?
Well, so it's funny because that happened when I was still pretty early in my career, and I was naive. I hadn't seen an economic correction or a season like that before, and I was very similar. I don't know that it was heart attack. I mean, what you explained resonated a lot. I was a pretty hard charging, very naive person that thought that I could do anything and I could just make the rules. And it was, and I quickly learned that that's a fantasy.
Yeah. We think we're in control, but we are not in control, right?
Yep.
And when you let go, that's when you experience peace. That's what I did, right? I just let go. I can't do this anymore. It's like, no matter how I try to figure this out, do you think I wanted to live an 8-figure business? I'm still in 7 figures after 11 years, and I'm okay. No worries,
That's so, I love that. That is a wisdom of it's a wisdom of a man that's been around the block.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's okay. And if I ever get to 8 or 9 figures, I know it's not going to add more happiness to my life.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Totally right.
And the freedoms that I have right now, I appreciate them a lot, right? I was listening to this story. This guy had a $20 million business. He figured out the business model, and he was approached by the bank where he could actually get a substantial loan to scale to $100 million. He hired a consultant, a financial consultant, to figure it out, and the guy told him, listen, you can keep growing, but don't do it as fast. You have a $20 million prosperous business, 20% EBITDA. You're doing fine. Like, if you want to grow this much, there's also high risk. The guy didn't listen, and he went for a big loan. He made it to $100 million. Then that recession hit. He lost the business and his house. Like, he was so into debt that he ended up losing his home where he lived with his family.
Wow.
Think about that. And that's what greed gets you, right? And I bet he became a better man after that, because, again, the biggest problems gives you the most breakthroughs afterwards.
Yep. Right. It all works out.
It all works out at the end, brother.
Absolutely.
So listen, thank you so much for your time. I know I have to respect your time. I could speak to you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. One last question. If you had access to a billboard located in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Wow. It's really interesting, David, because I think that the answer to that question, if I were to have been asked that question once a year, be thankful.
Be thankful. That's beautiful.
I have developed a gratitude practice over the last 2 years that has truly changed my experience of being a human being. And I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago because I had not yet discovered it. But I have realized that every day can be a day that you are bathing in gratitude for the simplest things, such as your health, such as a sunny day, such as, a great meal. It doesn't have to be epic wins that are the things that are causing, you to feel like you're happy or thankful. It's really the simplest things. It is the sunrise in the morning on your way to the gym. It is a good cup of coffee. And that has been the biggest change in my life, from the version of me that existed before, where I was really never satisfied ever, despite any given year, week, quarter, whatever, having major wins that one would think should have caused lots of satisfaction, which often did not. I've really found a joy of living. I'm 48 years old, and it's been the last 24 months that I've started to discover how to live with joy, and so much of it is rooted in gratitude.
That's all it is, actually. There is this quote that says, "Godliness with contentment is of great gain," and that's what you're describing. Is being thankful. Just the fact that we live in the most prosperous part in the world.
Yep.
Like, honestly, Canada and the USA is the most prosperous part of the world. It doesn't matter how much you have or what you do. Just the fact that you're in this side of the continent.
Understood.
Right.
And there's so many things like that. The list is so long of things that if you really reflected on how wonderful it is, it's an endless list.
Yeah.
Most people that we know have food. There's just so many things, and so it's almost like living in a different domain for me. And I always appeared to be very happy.
Being thankful for the air that I breathe.
Right. Yeah, sure. Of course.
Right?
Pretty
2
key
minutes.
thing when you're scuba diving.
2-3 minutes underwater, you have no gas left, no air left, you die.
Right. Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Brother,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I wish you the best. One last thing before we end, if people would like to get in touch with you or learn more about your new business and maybe participate, how they can find you?
Website would probably be the easiest. It's www.stout, STOUT, Ventures, VENTURES.com. StoutVentures.com. Yep.
Marc, brother, thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing you again soon in Phoenix.
For sure. Blessings,
Thanks,
brother.
David.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.